Welcome to the channel, everybody. Let's get after it.
This footage has just been released by NASA due to a Freedom of Information request by Trump's team. This is the strangest footage I have ever seen. Watch and listen to this. This is from Apollo 11, inside the capsule, and watch what appears.
8-5. Okay, Charlie, we're in the limb. The tracking index mark is the same. Roger, we copy. Houston, Apollo 11 Eagle. 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Houston out, over. Hello, Eagle, Houston, we're standing by, over. Eagle, Houston, we. Hello, Eagle, Houston, we're standing by, over. Listen,
I don't really know if that's where that footage came from. I tried to verify this and I couldn't find the footage anywhere else. The reason I put this in here is, for one, I don't believe we ever went to the moon. So I personally don't believe that this footage is real. But two, I wanted to bring something to everyone's attention. Are you aware that they are now openly admitting that what they showed us on the TV in 1969 was all faked footage? They're openly admitting it now. Conspiracy confirmed. In the description of this video, I'm going to link a news article put out by CBS where they flat out tell you that it was all faked and presented to the public as live footage.
Far enough up to see what the Earth looked like was a guy named Auguste Piccard. Most of us have never heard of this person because when he made it to the stratosphere, he said he saw what appeared to be a flat disk with an upturned edge. Now, after Auguste Piccard ventured to the stratosphere, we have the U.S. Air Force showing us the stars from space for the very first time. And when you look at what they showed us, what they actually saw, you begin to understand why the moon landing never had stars in the background, why they're not showing us stars from space anymore, because it's very difficult to pull this off.
The sky is deep black.
As you can see the stars.
Oh yeah.
You know, and pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
The sky, of course, was black.
the heavens are 10 times as bright, stars 10 times as numerous.
And we cannot see stars.
The thing about Carl Sagan, billions of billions, is that there really are billions and billions of stars, and you can see them.
It's an unfathomable blackness, like texture you feel like you could stick your hand into.
And that's when things start to get weird, because people have gone back and looked at declassified documents that for some reason keep mentioning a flat, non-rotating Earth. Over and over again, it's in their flight plans, it's in all their working models. This flat, stationary Earth repetitively keeps showing up. If it doesn't exist, there'd be absolutely no reason to base all of your science on it. Something else shows up. In the 50s, in Russia, they had documents describing the firmament.
Don't worry, this video is not going to be all about the Earth being flat. While I do think it is beyond interesting that we have all these references to a flat Earth in the firmament, I just don't feel like it matters what shape the Earth is. So I'm never going to get hung up on that theory. It honestly wouldn't have any impact on my day-to-day activities if I suddenly found out that the Earth is in fact shaped like a twisty straw. It just doesn't really matter. I added this as an example of what kind of nonsense NASA has tried to pass off to us as legitimate footage in the past. When they're giving us footage like that and telling us that that's real, why should we give them the benefit of the doubt on literally any other footage that they give to us? Hey, don't forget to click like and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my merch store at barry-stepp.com.
So you'll see in sunlight, shadows always run parallel and never intersect. Here's a picture which the federal government claims was taken on the moon. The astronaut shadow runs at 12 o'clock, and this rock, only about 5 feet away, the shadow runs at 9 o'clock. This is a 90-degree difference from objects 5 feet apart from one another. This proves that this was taken on Earth with an electrical light inside of a television studio. This is all the proof that you need that the moon landings were fake. If Toyota said that they made a car 50 years ago that could go 50,000 miles on a gallon of gasoline, and yet today their best car could only go 50 miles per gallon, or 1,000th the distance, wouldn't the fraud of the previous claim be obvious? And yet this is exactly the moon landing fraud, and yet people don't see it because of their emotional attachment to it. They're claiming they went 1,000 times farther 50 years ago than they can go today with 50-year-older technology. That doesn't make any sense. It's the only time in history that a technological achievement like the automobile or the airplane or nuclear power, that no nation on Earth could repeat it 50 years later, when in fact it should be 100 times greater 50 years later. If they could go to the moon with 1960s technology, men would be in another solar system by now. Men would have walked on Mars 10 years later, 40 years ago, which never happened. And there would be bases on the moon there today, of which there are none. It's the only time in the history of the world that technology that cost $175 billion was deliberately destroyed afterwards. Would Bill Gates spend $175 billion to make the first computer, and then when he was done, throw it and the schematics in the trash? But that's what NASA claims that they did. They only did that to destroy the evidence of the fraud, which is proof itself that they didn't go, because if they really went, they would never destroy the technology. The B-52 bomber was made 70 years ago and is still in service today in the United States Air Force because it worked so well. Now they want to return to the moon, and they're having to recreate all that equipment from scratch because they deliberately destroyed it in order to hide the evidence of the fraud. I say it's harder to believe that the moon landings are real than to believe that they were fake. And this one picture proves that it was taken inside of a television studio on Earth.
If you're watching this and you still believe that we landed on the moon in 1969, I honestly want to know what evidence you've seen that has you convinced. I know I talk about this a lot, but I feel like this is one of the most obvious lies ever perpetrated against mankind. And it just blows my mind that after all this time, after all the evidence that's come out, after all the interviews with the astronauts contradicting themselves or just flat out saying they never went, people still believe it. Please let me know in the comments what has you so convinced that we actually went.
The war in Iraq. Everybody meet Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was an ancient Sumerian king who ruled in what we now know is modern-day Iraq. And he was a 17 to 20 foot giant. He was a demigod, which means he was half human and half god. Now, Gilgamesh was a barbaric king. He built up and ruled over the city of Uruk, which is, again, modern-day Iraq. So what does he have to do with the war in Iraq? This brings us to 2003, when German archaeologist Jörg Fassbinder was digging in modern-day Iraq, and he thought he found the city of Uruk.
Gilgamesh was simply a figment of myth. That was until Jörg Fassbinder and his team of archaeologists, using modern technology to look deep into the ground, discovered an entire ancient city beneath the desert, astonishingly laid out just as the city of Uruk, over which Gilgamesh had purportedly reigned, was described in the epic. More importantly, on the outskirts of the ancient city was what appeared to be a burial site, which archaeologists believed to be the tomb of the ancient king.
So Jörg goes to the authorities, tells them he thinks that he found the city of Uruk and possibly the tomb of Gilgamesh, and 5 months later, we invade Iraq. Now here's where it gets crazy, because not only did we invade Iraq immediately after his findings, our military builds a base directly over the ruins. Anyway, it's not a secret that the USA established a base in the old Babylonian city, destroyed some historical artifacts, and also took with them many of the artifacts. They constructed buildings and helicopter landing pads in the ancient city. It's not a secret that they were searching for something very important.
This is where it gets crazy. Yeah. All the archaeological sites were then stopped in Iraq, so stop digging, you're out of here. And the U.S. military set up an encampment around the tomb site. But the locals around this encampment reported that the U.S. military were digging at night, taking things out of the ground and putting them onto trucks and driving them off.
There were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
And, something's wrong. It's a whole world of deceit. We're going into Iraq to get artifacts? Not to get anything but artifacts. That was the most important thing, they said.
But which artifacts?
I don't know. They just said artifacts. There were things in Iraq that were sold that we had to go get. Bush wanted those artifacts. It was very important.
Did we get them? And if so, where did they go?
We got them. They said they got everything they needed from that country.
Where is it?
I don't know. We have it.
Saddam Hussein was building a massive reconstruction of Babylon near the ancient city. Was he trying to hide something huge? Is that why the U.S. decided to invade Iraq so fast and acquire the ancient relic? If you go on the Department of State's website and type in Gilgamesh, you are actually brought to the formal request for the ancient tomb of Gilgamesh. They were requesting his body from the burial site. So when we invaded Iraq, we went in and just took it all. And we actually had to return it. There's even an email from WikiLeaks that says requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. Our entire world is biblical. So what does our government do? It comes in and it covers it up.
We've covered this theory before, and I was really quick to write it off. The reason I was so quick to do that is because we didn't invade Iraq until March of 2003, and this supposed burial site wasn't being reported on until April of that year. However, it was pointed out to me by a viewer that what likely happened is, before they made this announcement to the public, they likely alerted all the governments of the world to this find first. Then, after several weeks of the story getting out there, the media decided to cover it and do a story on it. And just because the first story being written about this burial site was in April of 2003, that doesn't mean that that's when it was discovered. Besides that, there have been 0 updates on this site in almost 23 years. I think that is a pretty good indication that there's at least an attempt to sweep this whole thing under the rug.
If this was, I'm going to use this word predicted for lack of a better word. This is not prophecy, but prediction. If this was predicted 27 years ago, somebody knew something. Okay, here's the list. This is an abbreviated list. I could have made it much longer. You know I can. I didn't. Okay, you ready for the list? Fast mutating viral disease pandemics. Genetically developed smart IDs. 1997! I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scream, but, just make sure none of you are nodding off, because the eyes get heavy. And DNA database tracking. DNA chips. Get this one. 1997, gene-based pharmaceuticals. Transmitting genetic instructions for a disease process. How about this one? You ready for it? Wait for it. Artificial intelligence to determine gene patterns. 27 years ago, who had heard about AI? Apparently they had. How about this one? Robots for doing genome sequencing. And then, this one blew me away. Using recombinant DNA for making spike proteins. 1997? It gets even worse. Smart homes. They have a whole chapter on smart homes / smart cities. This one will absolutely floor you. It did me. In 1997, and this is, you can do the word search and research yourself. They predicted not 2025, but by 2020, that people would be working from home virtually. Ah, come on.
I did some digging to try to see what book he's talking about, and it appears to be called The Sovereign Individual Mastering the Transition to the Information Age. I put this in here because I was asked to react to it. I'm assuming because I'm usually pretty quick to write off any kind of predictions for the future. I do think that I know how they predicted all this stuff, though. I was alive back in the late 90s, and I was a teenager who loved to read his popular science magazines, and almost all of this stuff was being talked about fairly heavily back in the late 90s. I think they could accurately predict these things because they were actually paying attention to what was going on around them. If you read up on the technology at the time, all of this stuff was being heavily invested in and researched. Of course you can predict something like this is going to happen in the future if there's 20 companies out there actively researching how to pull it off.
Do you remember this video of this strange canine? Well, it seems to be making its way around the continent of the Americas, where this particular species exists further afield, and this is another one of this kind. An Uber driver captured this on camera last week in Colombia. This is the driver's statement. I recorded this video while I was working as an Uber driver in Jos Cepas, around 3 in the morning. At that time the streets are usually deserted and surrounded by a disturbing silence, but what I caught that night was something out of the ordinary. In this area, many people have spoken of strange apparitions of the Lobis, a creature of the Guarani mythology, which according to popular beliefs is the seventh son of Baron, condemned into being half man and half beast. It is said that he wanders through the dark paths and imitates a terrifying lament before disappearing through the darkness. What I saw that night left me with more questions than answers. Was it just a coincidence or did I really catch something inexplicable? Please help.
Mira, me parece que anda el lobizón. Este es el lobizón, loco. Este es el lobizón. ¿A dónde está? Los perros lo ladran. ¿A dónde está? Desapareció la concha. Allá está, mirá. Allá está, ¿lo ves? Ese es el lobizón, mirá. Mirá. A ver si lo filmo. Ese es el lobizón. Me corto la bola ese lobizón. Mira, mira qué feo, mira qué feo, mira.
Atención, radar fijo.
Mira.
Límite 40.
Qué feo que. Este es el lobizón, loco. Ese es el lobizón, ¿sabes cómo lo corrían los perros?
That's absolutely wild. It's starting to look like someone might have actually caught a new species or something on camera here. I was really impressed with the first video they caught of this thing, if that's the same animal. It almost moves like you would expect a person in a suit to move if they were walking on all fours. But there's no way for a person to fit in a dog suit like that. The thing just doesn't seem to move like a normal dog. It almost looks like it has more joints in its legs than a normal dog has. Almost looks like the way a horse walks. It's really crazy looking. I'm not really sure what to think about this thing, but I've never seen seen anything like it. Maybe it's a really rare breed of dog that I'm not familiar with, but I'm completely convinced that this is a real animal, and it don't look like any dog I've ever seen before.
A post by Kris Jenner in October may have revealed that Kim Kardashian was the mystery buyer of a $5 million Basquiat painting. Just look at Kim's home here. This is the full picture of it. It was bought in 2017 at Christie's, and if you look at who owns Christie's, you'll find it's the same people behind Balenciaga. You're gonna start to see how everything is connected. Christie's sells some very interesting artwork, including stuff by Jake and Dino's Chapman, and here's one of their pieces of artwork, probably one of the only ones that I can even show on here. Kim K was actually also in a bidding war with Tom Brady over a George Condo piece for $2 million. If his name sounds familiar, he's the one who created those private invitations for the A-list only all-white party last year. Now Brady's also a big Basquiat fan. Just look at the background of his home here. I also once noticed an interesting Basquiat painting in Ellen's home. You might remember this video, but she posted this during COVID. And isn't it strange that her shirt matches the painting that I showed you earlier? But as the camera pans over, you can see in the background of her home the Basquiat painting, and this one in particular says evil thoughts, but you'll start to learn she has quite a few of these. This one in particular has interesting letters on it, similar to what you would see in the work of Marina Abramovich. And then Ellen once posted this picture of her cutting her own mother's hair on Instagram, and if you look above this picture, you can see another Basquiat painting, and this one just seems off.
Knowing how the art world functions, and that it's essentially just a big money laundering operation for the wealthy, and knowing that they just prop up certain artists so that they can increase the value of their work and sell it for more than they invested in it, I find it very telling that the artist, all these celebrities, decided to prop up this go-around as some guy who paints what looks like demonic finger paintings. Even if this was given to you as a gift, who wants a painting hanging in their living room of a little red demon with the word unconscious scribbled across it? That's clearly a painting made with evil intent, and you're just going to display it in the common area of your family home? These celebrities are broken. Something is wrong with your mind if you think that this is healthy to look at every day.
I want to give you a sneak preview of my buddy's research with magnetic fields. His name's Nigel, and he researches magnets and how they interact with light. Okay, so the general narrative is we have gravitational lensing and things like that. He can recreate a lot that we see in the cosmos and create these awesome toroidal field patterns, bending light and laser light, squiggling light and bending light, and even spiraling light. Now, doesn't that kind of look like Saturn's rings a little bit? You know, he's almost recreating what we see and what modern science says is gravitational lensing. Look, is that a galaxy, or is that... He says that white spot up there at the top was as hot as the sun. It was melting his equipment, and it's incredible what magnets and electromagnetism can do. Now, this photo in particular I was very interested in because you've got this toroidal field with a laser light bending into it, and how it looks a lot like the black hole that modern science gave us. It was, of course, enhanced for our viewing pleasures, but they say that gravitational lensing is taking place around the event horizon, and light is bending and warping into that gravitational field, right? And not even light can escape it, right? They call this gravitational lensing, and it's done around different celestial bodies as well. But could it simply be electromagnetism? This is spiraling laser light here that we're talking about. And ionic phenomenon are taking place as he's doing this research. I want to have him on to discuss some of these things, but he said that white light there at the top was so hot it was burning and melting his equipment. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I want him to explain this photograph, because by the way it sounded, this was like almost an optical phenomenon, like this illusion almost of this infinite tunnel with a light at the end. I want him to explain this better. I want to have him on the live show to just let us have it, man.
I'm starting to think that there's a possibility that mainstream science has gotten the theory of gravity wrong. There is so much evidence now pointing toward electromagnetic fields being responsible for what we think or assume gravity is responsible for. I'm starting to see this idea discussed in mainstream science as well. It's not being heavily talked about, but it is being talked about. We may see one of the most fundamental theories of science flipped on its head in the near future. That's something I never would have seen coming. But guys and gals, I'm going to go ahead and end the video right right there. I hope you enjoyed these clips we watched together today. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. I hope you come back to join me. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my merch store at berry-stepp.com. And don't forget to leave a photo of your merch over in the Discord to get your photo and a video. But with all that out of the way, I hope everyone has a great, safe, fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow.